The United States houses more than 2 million people in state and federal prisons. This is the highest prison population in the world. The second highest is China with 1.5 million. Black men, on average, receive prison sentences that are 20% longer than white men for the same crimes, given the same criminal histories. In this country, 1 in every 4 black males will spend time behind bars. That's twice the rate of Hispanic males, and that's 6 times the rate of white men. Today, we're going to explore what justice looks like from a biblical perspective. What we discover might challenge some of our preconceived notions and maybe even cause us to reconsider some convictions we have. At the end of the next 15 minutes, it's my hope that you'll have a clearer understanding of what biblical justice is. This is To the Point. I'm Jon Noyes. Thanks for tuning in. You know, the discussions centered on justice have been derailed by things like critical race theory and social justice. We've allowed ourselves to be distracted. While we might think we're talking about justice, we're spending our time actually talking about other philosophical systems, not justice. You see, CRT is a common piñata in our circles. We love to take turns taking a whack at it. Hey, I mean, I took a whack at it in an article I wrote in September. But have we ever stopped to look with a fresh set of eyes and an open heart on what's before us? You know, if we did, we'd find CRT at least points in the direction of a real sin issue. An issue that only biblical justice has the answer for. Instead of agreeing societal ills diagnosed by CRT exist and then championing the solution and steering the conversation towards King Jesus and his justice, we just take another whack at the piñata. Well, I got to tell you guys, I'm tired of hitting the piñata. I want to understand what true justice is and what it looks like so I can then offer the solution CRT can't. And I hope that's what we're going to get to right now. I want to remind you guys right now, if you're watching, please comment in the comment section. And at the end of the 10 minutes or so I have left, I'll scroll through the comments and hopefully answer some of your questions. So the question is what is justice from a biblical perspective? When we use the word justice, we mean something. You know, words have meaning and they matter. Mainly, when we use that word, we mean rendering to someone what they're due. Justice implies conformity to an ethical or a moral standard. Now, keep in mind, true justice requires the existence of an objective standard. That's why anything outside of a theistic system ultimately fails. So justice is the conformity to an ethical or moral standard defined by the nature and the will of God. This standard, it's revealed to us in God's law, and Scripture actually provides us with a comprehensive guide to justice. The psalmist says, "Oh, how I love your law. It's my meditation all the day." You know, he goes on to say in Psalm 119, "Your righteousness is righteous forever, and your law is true." Paul says that the law is holy, and the commandment is holy and righteous and good. You see, true justice, it flows from God's nature and from his character. In Social Justice versus Biblical Justice, a small little pamphlet, E. Calvin Beisner points out, and I quote, "The biblical concept of justice is rendering impartially and proportionally to everyone his due in accordance with the righteous standard of God's law." Notice in this standard, biblical justice requires several things. First, justice is impartial. Listen to how Moses instructs the judges of Israel in Deuteronomy. He says, "Hear the cases between your fellow countrymen and judge righteously between a person and his fellow countryman or the stranger who's with him." He says, you're to not show partiality in judgment. You shall hear the small and the great alike. You're not to be afraid of any person, for the judgment is God's. You see, I think also this impartiality is a tricky thing. You know, I think it needs to be qualified here, because sometimes we use impartiality to skirt issues. You see, God seems to show some partiality to the widow, to the orphan, to the fatherless, the outcast, and the least of these. He doesn't show partiality to the extent that they get the standard bent on their behalf or in their direction. The standard doesn't bend, but God's justice is the only form of justice that puts a spotlight on them and gives these people a preferential priority in defense. One way that we actually see this played out in today's world is as larger and more successful law firms offer pro bono services to clients that otherwise wouldn't be able to afford them. In fact, and I'm going to mention this later, I worked at some of these law firms as a paralegal, and many of the cases that we brought before the Supreme Court were done in a pro bono manner, meaning without a fee. We did them for free. That's showing, in a way, partiality towards the weak, the widow, the orphan, the least of these, offering services for free. Now, we don't bend the standard of law, but we do shine a spotlight on these people, and God does the same thing through His Word. And actually, this is the main reason God's justice is the only solution to the problem diagnosed by CRT. This is what puts the CRT in the basement and elevates God's law and the theistic system of biblical justice to the forefront in offering a true and a robust solution. So impartiality is the first. Second, justice renders to each what's due. We see this in Exodus 21 and 22 as we read all the case law regarding specific crimes and the penalties for violating specific laws. Now these are the ordinances which you're to set before them, is what God says. See, in God, he leads by example here. In Romans, Paul says, but because of your stubbornness and unrepentant heart, you store up wrath for yourself on the day of wrath and revelation of the righteous judgment of God, who will repay each person according to his deeds. To the church in Corinth, each will receive his own reward according to his own labor. Paul says the same thing to the Galatians. Do not be deceived. God's not mocked. For whatever a person sows, this he'll also reap. The third element of biblical justice and true justice, it's proportional. When justice is accomplished, there's a balance between action and reward or punishments. For example, Leviticus 24 distinguishes between crimes done to a person and crimes done to property. The penalty for taking the life of a human being is different than the penalty for taking the life of a cow, for example. Proportionality also distinguishes accidental crimes from intentional crimes. If a person accidentally damages a neighbor's property, justice or biblical justice requires that the cost is split between the two parties. But if it's shown that there's negligence or intentionality, the neighbor has to bear the full price of restitution. Proportionality is where we get the statement, the punishment should fit the crime. This is lax talionis in legal circles. You may have heard that term before. And lastly, justice conforms to the standard of God's law. This includes the 10 Commandments, but it also includes all the moral statutes and ordinances throughout the case laws I mentioned a few minutes ago. You see, true justice flows from God's character and is manifest through God's law. And this is where we get our understanding of rights, by the way. When rights are violated, we turn to these things for recourse. I should also make mention of this. Just let me add, properly understood, rights aren't guarantees. This is important. Rights are not guarantees that something will be provided for us, but instead they're guarantees that what's ours won't be unjustly taken from us. You can apply this to everything from property to goods and services to life. You see, biblical justice is the application of biblical law in all spheres of society. And I want to ask, how are we doing at that? My goal here isn't necessarily to answer that question, but it's a necessary one to talk about. At the start of our time, I mentioned some staggering statistics. When I said these things, among other issues, often, or at least when I bring these up, I should say, when I bring these issues up in conversation with conservative Christians, I am a conservative Christian, people seem to get nervous I've heard this recently in some of my discussions. Maybe I've gone woke, or someone recently used the term social justice warrior to describe me. Well, I haven't gone woke. I've just dug into what justice looks like, and out of compassion for the least of these in our society, I think that we can do way better than what we're doing. Actually, my argument is if we want to win the culture war, the secret weapon is true justice and service to the least of these. Jesus, he leads by example in this, by the way. If you go to Matthew 20, right? So you've got his guys, his disciples are arguing over who's going to sit next to him, right? Am I going to sit next to you? Who's going to sit next to you? And do you remember Jesus's response here? He says, you know that the rulers of the Gentiles domineer over them, and those in high positions exercise authority over them. It's not this way among you, but whoever wants to become prominent among you shall be your servant. And whoever desires to be first among you shall be your slave. Notice he uses servant and slave. I don't have enough time to get into that, but he uses both of those terms. And he goes on to say, just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. Now, I'm not a social justice warrior, but I do want to reclaim social justice terminology. Social justice is just one application of biblical justice. So we'd have to look at what we mean by social justice, pass it through the biblical lens, and then decide whether or not it's true justice. For example, if by social justice, someone means pursuing a society in which the law of God is applied equally to all people in all situations, then this, by definition, is justice. If it means out of compassion for the poor, providing food and care to them, a mandate in Scripture, by the way, this is true justice. Unfortunately, though, oftentimes something else is meant. Instead of someone talking of, when someone talks about social justice, they mean let me think of an example here. They mean that there's a guarantee of equality of outcome across any situation, that everybody should end up in the same exact place. But the only way of achieving this would be to violate biblical justice. It's impossible to guarantee that everyone will land in the same place without violating at least one of the four criteria for doing justice, whether it be impartiality, rendering what's due, proportionality, or obtaining or conformity with the standard of God's law. Some people are actually taller than other people, and that means that some people will have a better chance of playing pro basketball, for example. Are there exceptions? Yeah, Muggsy Bogues, growing up, he played, I think he was like 5'8" or something, or 5'6", and he made it to the pros. But these examples and the bad examples of social justice don't excuse us from the responsibility as Christians to seek and bring about a more just society. And oftentimes I feel like that's what happens. I want to ask again, how do we do that? We do it by fastening on a full-orbed Christian worldview and taking God's word seriously, especially in reference to justice. Christianity says that our fundamental problem is sin. Original sin places all humanity on equal footing. No one is exempt. Paul says that all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. And yes, sin includes racism, discrimination, and bigotry, but it includes ignoring the poor and not standing up to injustices as well. Yeah, oppressors are sinners, but so too are the oppressed in their own way. And CRT has no foundation or solution, only the problem. We have the foundation and the solution. It's biblical justice, provided we know and live biblical justice out. CRT isn't a threat. If you view it like this, CRT, the thing that we're commenting on so much, it's not a threat, guys. It's actually an opportunity. It's an opportunity for us to address the culture war and win it. Christianity is what provides the best reason to believe that things like oppression and racism are wrong. Every human being is made in the image of God. So God created man in his own image, and in the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. It's not the color of our skin or any other physical characteristic that gives people value, worth, and dignity. Being made in the image of God is the great equalizer. This is where justice finds its true beginning. This is why the statistics, though, that I mentioned should cause us some major concern. Racism and oppression, they exist. They do. Bigotry abounds among fallen people of every race and multitudes. They're really hurting. And it's time that we start directing our efforts at the problems themselves instead of the false and failed systems of the world. As Christians, we fight for both justice and mercy. Micah reminds us that what does the Lord require of you but to do justice and to love mercy and to walk humbly with our God. This is something that we all fail at if we're honest with each other. So sometimes we do the hard work of humbly applying biblical truth to all areas of life. And when we do that, opposing oppression, when we encounter it, we can stand firm. And we point people to Jesus, who's the ultimate unifier. So now with the basic framework in place, the question remains: how are we doing at this? Is our justice system impartial in defense of the least of these? Do we render what is due in a proportional way? Do our laws conform with the standards of God's law? I went to American University in Washington, D.C., where I majored in criminal justice, one of the best criminal justice programs in the country. From there, I went on to work at some of the world's best law firms as a paralegal. I've worked on cases at every level, including in front of the U.S. Supreme Court. I've worked on death penalty cases and right to life cases. The lawyers I worked with represented some very ordinary and very poor clients. They also represented some very famous and very rich clients. From my experience, I can tell you we have a lot of work to do when it comes to biblical justice. I want to be part of the solution. Instead of just tearing down a false ideology, a false system, I want to be lifting up the only solution. And his name's Jesus. And it's his law that we should be focusing on. So now let me take a look at some of the comments that we have. And I'm gonna look down, guys, because the camera's up here. My computer is down here, and see what we got. It doesn't look like a ton, but that's fine. Oh, and you know what I should mention, as you guys might be thinking and adding some comments, we are having an amazing season at Stand to Reason's Reality Student Apologetic Conference. And we travel all over the country now, 6 cities. We've done 4. We just got back from Dallas, sold out audience to these students. I mean, we're talking like 2,200 students came to hear us wrestle and so that we can wrestle with them through these really difficult issues. Race is one of them. We offer a talk on CRT. Monique Desan does a wonderful job. We also hit up homosexuality with Beckett Cook. I speak on suicide. We talk about the traditional apologetic stuff like fine tuning. Tim Barnett did a talk on fine tuning. Our newest speaker, Robbie Lashawa, he spoke on the resurrection. So it's just amazing. And you guys, you have an opportunity here to attend. We're going to be in Philadelphia in 2 weeks. And if you are within striking distance of Philadelphia, that's our Northeast Conference. You don't want to miss it. It's our first time in Philly. I think we're like 50% sold out now. I think it's going to sell out. It's going to be amazing. So anyways, I just wanted to say that. Also, if I don't get to your question and you have more questions about what I'm talking about, feel free to either call in on Tuesdays to the radio program with Greg and ask your questions, and then you can get them answered live, or hashtag STRask. Hashtag STRask is a fantastic resource on Twitter. You can just ask your question, and then Amy and Greg will answer it on their STRask podcast, which is so much fun. So with that, let's see here. And I'm actually going to be developing right now a new STRU course on biblical justice that'll be out, I think, next quarter. But we just launched a few weeks ago this quarter's ones, one on atheism, Greg's bumping into reality, and then I did one on the problem of evil. So training.str.org or training / Harmony will put it in the comments. But it's a fantastic resource. These things are free, guys. Free resources for you guys to get trained up, and that's our goal, is to help train Christians to defend the Christian worldview out in the marketplace of ideas. So let's see here. Scott, let's see. Can you comment on how the basis of critical theory rejects objective truth? I've found that this fairly new critical theory looks tolerant and equitable on the surface, but is really a protest to all transcendent authority, or in biblical terms, and lawlessness. Have you seen this? I have seen this, Scott. I'm gonna do a really quick treatment of this. Critical theory is a legal theory that gained prominence in the 70s. It's based on a Marxist ideology, which in and of itself is atheistic. There's no God in it. Which once you do that, you are steeped in relativism. Once you get rid of a transcendent being, you get rid of a transcendent law, certainly a transcendent moral law. So yeah, it's relativistic at its core. Basically, what CRT would do is say that in order to address the issue of oppression, the oppressed need to usurp the authority and become the oppressors. But notice what happens there is it creates a cyclical system where the oppressed, once you become an oppressor, all of a sudden you're an oppressor, and then the oppressed need to rise up, and there's no end to it. There's no end at all in that system. It doesn't actually offer a solution, but like I said in what I was just talking about, it actually does point us to a societal problem, though, and that's what I feel like is skipped over or glossed over. What we do is we spend a lot of time addressing CRT, which it's a faulty system. We got to address it. It's false, so we got to tear it down. But what I don't see is the discussion turning towards biblical law and a better system, offering a better alternative to, or at least CRT doesn't even offer a solution, but at least offering a solution to the problem that CRT highlights. And so CRT is actually something that is an opportunity for us, because look at all the discussions that are being had on issues of justice. We are the ones, the Christian worldview gives the best answer to these issues. So if we're honest and we move into them, it gives the gospel an opportunity to shine. It gives the Christian worldview an opportunity to rise to the top, and unfortunately, I feel like we're missing that opportunity oftentimes, because we're stopping short. We're tearing down the philosophy. We're taking a whack at the piñata. But I don't want to whack at that anymore, So I have noticed this. It does reject objective truth, because it's built on a system that there's no grounding for any type of objective truth, certainly a moral objective truth. And the new critical theory, and it's also interesting because it can be applied. They're applying it to everything, right? It's being applied to everything, and I'm not sure that that's necessarily what the creators of CRT, or the initial proponents of CRT, intended. But yeah, it is. It's relativistic in general. Good question. Hey, I'll take this. God bless you. God bless you. Thank you. You also comment here. It's J Hindem X. Equity, uprightness, evenness, righteousness. One of the things that the biblical worldview offers to us is that we are all equal. We start out on equal ground, as fallen and broken people. We're made in the image of God, though, and the same redemption is offered to all of us, every single one of us, equally. There's not one person that is higher in a statute or standard according to the law of God than any other person. And this is the true equalizer, is the gospel. It's that we're made in the image of God, that everything was made perfect and right, but through sin entering the world, everything got messed up. And part of that is me and you. We mess things up. We're sinful people, but God hasn't left us to our own devices and faulty systems. God has chosen to enter into the cosmos and put on flesh in the person, the work of Jesus Christ. And he is the one who took on the penalty that we deserve, paid the price that we can't afford, and died on a Roman cross. His blood washes us clean of our sins, so that when God looks at us, he's not looking at our filthy deeds, but he's actually seeing his son's righteous robes wrapped around us. It's a beautiful thing. It's an amazing thing. And this is offered to everybody. That I gave my one only begotten Son, that's whoever should believe in him shall not perish, but inherit eternal life. This is an offer to every single person. You want to talk about equity, equality. It's nowhere more than in the gospel, and but I do feel like oftentimes we don't apply that gospel message to every area of our life, certainly justice. So yes, let's see here. They changed the biblical definition of equity to fit a critical theory narrative. Well, this is what we should expect, though, guys. The critical theory doesn't offer a solution. There's no solution on critical theory. In order to offer a solution, they have to borrow from our worldview. Frank Turek wrote the book Stealing from God. I recommend it. They have to steal from our worldview. Of course they do, because our worldview is the true worldview. It's a true story of reality. It accurately reflects the world as it really is. We have the answers, and anything other than that, if they're going to try to prop up a solution, they're going to have to steal from our worldview. But again, I want to focus on let's offer a better solution. Let's argue for the validity and the superiority of the biblical justice, and then not stop there. Not just argue for the facts, but then live that out, moving into the hard issues, like into the statistics that I read up at the front. At the front of our time together. The criminal justice statistics are staggering to me. It seems to be that it's just the system, the criminal justice system is not living up to the standard of God. And then sometimes we want to just dismiss that as being, oh, well, we live in a fallen and broken world. Well, that's not good enough for me. I want to improve it. I want to apply the law of God on top of these things so that we can have a more just system. And in the process, what's amazing, guys, is in the process, everybody benefits, believer and non-believer. And one thing, as you start digging into this stuff, you'll see that the standards of God are applicable to everybody, not just the Jews, not just the Christians, but everybody. And that's throughout Exodus and Leviticus. God lays that out really, really clearly. So anyways, yeah. Hey, Michael. Good morning, man. Yeah, I'm glad I'm tackling it too. This is something that I've been doing a lot of reading on. One of the I mentioned in our brief time together that that somebody called me a social justice warrior. I should mention that was actually kind of like in jest slightly, because somebody was over actually my house and they were looking at my bookshelf. I have like a big, huge bookshelf in my living room that has a lot of my books on it, and I have a series a series of books, a section that's books related to justice issues, and that's how they're organized by topics. And in there, I have a lot of books that are considered, well, they don't come from a Christian worldview, right? So New Jim Crow, Reading While Black, although Reading While Black, I'd say, is Christian worldview. A lot of these books that are, on critical race theory, that are written from a critical theory perspective. So he was joking with me a little bit, my friends, when he said that. But I think it's important that we do tackle this issue. But in order to tackle this issue, I think that we need to read all sides and treat them equally, and treat them accurately. Because like I said, we whack at CRT, and sometimes I should say that I feel like we offer a caricature. Tear down the parts that are easy to tear down, but then we don't wrestle with the stuff that's remaining on the floor that's actually true. There is some truth to these philosophies. There is, and we need to wrestle with that from a biblical perspective. Loved, hey Scott, love how you stated what rights are. Where is that sourced from? Or better yet, what is widely accepted? Okay, so go back to the law of God, right? Is where we'd go. I actually cite it in my right here. I can look it up. But the book I mentioned also, Biblical Justice versus Social Justice, is a great resource for you. Thaddeus Williams also discusses this, I believe, in his book. Let me see if I can Say, let's see here. It's going to take me a minute to scroll through and find the sourcings, but it's I mean, it's straight out of Exodus and Leviticus, I'm sure. Um, Exodus 21 and Exodus 22, those are going to be the case laws. Um, this is where we get shoot, I'm not gonna be able to find it. But if you dig through Exodus 21, Exodus 22, and all the case law there, read Leviticus, and read social justice versus biblical justice, or biblical justice versus social justice, rather. He does a decent treatment, I think, of arguing, and this is a can of worms. But positive rights versus negative rights, and what that does in the culture. Oftentimes we'll hear, okay, so healthcare is an example, right? Every human being has a right to healthcare. Well, that's a positive right, and we have a right not to have our healthcare taken from us, but I'm not sure we have a right. Meaning, and when people say that, what's meant is that the government or somebody should take something from us and give it to somebody else unjustly. And this is, like I said, this is a can of worms to get into, but there's a lot to be said on positive versus negative rights. Boisner does a decent job. It's a short little treatment in his little book on that. Good comment, though. Thank you so much for that. I'll keep scrolling here. I feel like I passed some too. Let's see here. Rachel, you were a paralegal too, and you know what I'm talking about. Um, you know, I can't probably mention the clients and the names and all the cases, but my last law firm, we represented like not everybody, but a lot of people in Hollywood. A lot, like I mean, the client list was insane. The people that I got to meet, it was just so cool. Really, God was just very good in leading me to that job, and it was a great firm I worked. I absolutely loved my last job at that law firm. But it was clear. I mean, it was just clear that if you had money, you could afford the attorneys I worked for, and they didn't lose often. And you compare that to, and I'm not speaking disparagingly against public defenders. Actually, a couple of the attorneys I worked with started out as public defenders. That's how they made their careers. But you compare that, an attorney who's charging $1,000 an hour to a public defender who's getting paid, $70,000 a year, and has a caseload that is so overwhelming they can't even keep up with it. They don't even know the names of the clients because it's so overwhelming. I mean, it's not a comparison. One of the cases I worked on was Wiggins v. Smith, Wiggins v. State of Maryland. It was ineffective assistance of counsel, actually. So the whole case was around kind of what I'm talking about here. He was a man, Kevin Wiggins, was accused of and got convicted of murdering Florence Lax in Baltimore, and he got sentenced to death. His trial lasted like no time. The jury took no time to decide the death penalty, and there was so much that his public defender left out of the trial. His mental capabilities, his ability to even understand what was being said about him. He had his personal history of growing up, what it was like. His childhood was one of the worst I've ever seen in my entire life, if not the worst. And these things matter in the course of bringing about a true and good justice, right? Proportionality. And we brought there was an appeal process, and then we ended up taking the case all the way to the Supreme Court and won, where his sentence got reduced, so he's off of death row. And but this is a good instance. This is a good example of, this is a poor black man from the inner city of Baltimore, where if his situation was different, socioeconomically, racially, geographically, maybe even, the outcome could have been different. So anyways, I worked on some really great cases. It was a lot of fun. What's interesting is that I didn't work with I wasn't Christian at the time. I was an atheist, and I remember knowing that the work was so good that we were doing in some of these instances. That case in particular was just a highlight for me. And I remember thinking, wow, this is good. Like, we're doing good here. We are fixing a wrong within the criminal justice system. And it was Supreme Court. So now there's precedence, ineffective assistance of counsel. The counsel is held to a higher standard because of the hard work that we did in every case. So it was really beneficial. But as an atheist, I didn't have the grounding. It's like CRT. I knew the problem, but I couldn't put my feet on a foundation in order to raise up the solution. I knew what the solution was because we're all created in a certain way. God's truth runs through us all. We're made in the image of God. We have inherent dignity, value, and worth. We know that. And I mean, God has made that plain to us as the language in Romans. And most of the people that I worked with at that law firm, I don't think that they would characterize themselves as Christian. I can only remember working with one or two that would say that they were Christian. One was Catholic and one said that they were Christian. But it's interesting how they still felt that draw. And that's what I mean, that this is a great opportunity for us guys as Christians to pour our worldview over some serious issues in our culture and win the war that's raging around us and gain ground for Christ. Great stuff. So anyways, I had a great time in my career as a paralegal. No complaints here. STR University, guys, I mentioned it. Here's the training.str.org. Good, I was right. Fantastic free resources. They're free, literally. And we don't like bombard you guys. We're not gonna we don't solicit you guys. That's one of the things I absolutely love about Stand to Reason is that we just want to put solid resources in your hands. So okay. Make sure you get trained. Let's see here. Question. Do you agree with Carol Swain in her position on CRT? She's in the political trenches. Amazing Christian warrior. Thoughts? I actually don't know the name Carol Swain. Let me, I mean, I might know her by, let me see if I've read anything that she's written. No, I don't know who she is. I'd have to read what she has to say on it. It's funny. I stay out of the headlines in the news right now, just because everything is so crazy. So I have an amazing wife. So I married like really, really well. I married up for sure. And so my wife actually looks at the news. She's like a news person. So she'll look at the news every night. Whether it be on her phone or on the television and whatnot. And then she like forwards me articles having to do with like what I'm speaking on. So if I'm right now, I'm doing a lot of justice related stuff. She'll send me stuff that's related to that. I speak on suicide all over the country. And so she'll send me stuff on that so I can read up and update my talks and wrestle with some of the current events and stuff. But so no, I don't know. Carol Swain, maybe I should know her. She's in the political trenches, Christian warrior. I just don't know who she is, but that's okay. Maybe I will. Maybe she'll come across. Let's see here. Okay. I think most of the time we have to clarify what people mean by justice or equality. Absolutely. Since we live in a postmodern society, it's hard to pinpoint what people mean. I couldn't agree with this more. We need to offer definitions and ask that question, right? So this is a Columbo tactic. Columbo tactic is what do you mean by that? So when somebody says, I'm for equality, well, what do you mean equality? Because if equality means equal outcome given every single situation, that's not what equality is. But if equality means applying the law of God across every single spectrum, that is equality. So that absolutely we need to, we need to make sure we get definitions for our terms, and that's across the board, guys. Like we social justice is one I mentioned it, like the term social justice. A lot of us, when we hear social justice, we like have a reaction to it, like no, or social justice warrior, is usually the disparaging title that's used sometimes. Well, but social justice, if you trace the history of social justice, it is distinctly Christian. in early Christian writers, 100 years ago, 200, I guess that's not super early, but 200 years ago, 300 years ago, in certain way, even social justice was just a part of biblical justice. It's just one of the many aspects of doing biblical justice, just in the social sphere. And that's what I mean. I want to reclaim these things back. I want to take them back. I want to take dominion for God and in the kingdom of Christ. And these terms we should be leveraging, I think, for ourselves, because the social justice that's going on in popular culture is not justice at all. Or I mean, unless we can pass it, like if feeding the poor is an example of social justice, that is justice. Caring for the widow or the fatherless, for example, the fatherless. I just did a word study last night brief word study on fatherless compared to orphan. Because oftentimes, like, I've always felt compelled personally to move into the foster realm, adoption realm, taking care of the orphan being someone who's been abandoned or lost their parents. But there's way more talk of caring for the fatherless. And the fatherless is a different term. They're not the same term. The fatherless is somebody who's lost their father. And then I think about, I'm just being honest and wrestling with stuff with you guys. And then I think about the criminal justice system and the inner cities here. And oftentimes when I bring up the criminal justice system, one of the things that my brothers and sisters in Christ bring up is like, well, the problem isn't racial. The problem is fatherlessness. Well, either way, we should be moving into that issue according to Scripture. So we should be helping care for the fatherlessness. And if churches I just think about the impact that we could do. I pastor a small, teeny, tiny little church with almost no budget, but none of us pastors get paid. We have some money in the bank. And what if we were able to take our bank account, take that money and invest it in these communities, in offering resources to these kids who are growing up without fathers. And I'm not saying churches don't do this. Many churches do, but I don't think enough do. Or partnering with inner city church. I live in like paradise. I live in Southern California, in one of probably the most expensive places to live in the world. And what if I was able to take my resources and partner with an inner city church, take my people and partner with an inner city church, and then we can benefit each other, go down and ask a lot of questions and learn. Another great book. I got to look it up on my phone, guys, because I just finished it. Let me see here. If I can find it really quickly, I'll offer it. If not, I won't. But there's another great book that I just finished. If you guys want a good resource, Pursuing Justice by Ken Wytsma, and it's Ken Wytsma. Pursuing Justice by Ken Wytsma. And he spends a fair amount, the last maybe couple, I don't know, three or four chapters, he talks about missions, which is a justice related issue, but he brings up great points that are reiterated, or at least they were reiterating a point from another book that I read earlier, maybe years ago, called When Helping Hurts. So anyways, two great resources for you guys that talk about these issues. Let's see, Harmony, you texted me. I love it. There's a question in here about Ukraine and Russia. Let's see if I can find certainly the world's most dangerous injustice and peril of the poor, outcast, and I'm reading the comment without putting it on. Certainly in the world, most dangers of injustice imperil the poor, outcast, and downtrodden. But my understanding of God's justice is that it favors neither rich nor poor. True or false? God's justice, as far as the standard, does not favor rich or poor. And God's instruction through Moses to the judges of Israel in Exodus are clear that they're not to favor rich or poor or fear man. All justice is God's justice. However, there does seem to be, so this is impartiality. This is the first of the four things, Josh. There seems to be a spotlight placed on top of these marginalized groups of people, the poor, the outcast, the downtrodden. Now, the standard doesn't bend. But the opportunity for justice might bend. And I mentioned the way that this manifests itself today is through things like pro bono work that these big law firms do. That case, Wiggins v. State, we did that pro bono, right? I used to in Santa Monica, I worked at a fantastic law firm, that law firm that represented all the celebrity clients. Well, we represented people also from the inner city for free, pro bono, without any fee, and that's how I think preference can be shown. It seems to me like God has special care for these people because in the system of if in our system, at least in the reality of the system, um impartiality is not there. I mean, let's just be honest. If you have if you if you have money, for example, you can oftentimes afford a much better defense. I kind of mentioned this a little bit earlier, so I hope that answers your question. Um, yeah, it should not favor rich or poor. I'm trying to find it in my so I want to find the quote. All the scripture stuff I have written out. Justice impartial. So in Deuteronomy, hear the cases between your fellow countrymen and judge righteously between a person and his fellow countrymen for the stranger who is with him, or the stranger who is with him. You're not to show partiality in judgment. You shall hear the small and the great alike. You're not to be afraid of any person, for the judgment is God's. And then I offered the qualification that because sometimes we use impartiality to avoid some issues here, right? So God does, he shines a spotlight, or at least shows some type of partiality in some way for the widow, orphan, outcast, the least of these, right? The fatherless. James 1:27, Proverbs 19:17, Galatians 2. James mentions the bunch of the James 2:5. These would be instances where God instructs us to move towards these people. Yeah, and then so, but the partiality doesn't come by a bending of the standard in the direction. The standard doesn't bend, but God's justice. It's the God's justice, though, it puts a spotlight on these people, on the least. You can The least of these is how I group all this together: the orphan, the widow, the fatherless, the poor. It puts a spotlight on them, and gives them preferential treatment in defense, like a pro bono case. So the standard by which they're judged doesn't bend. A poor person commits a crime, the standard doesn't change, the law doesn't change. But in order to seek out true partiality, there has to be a moving towards that poor person to make sure that they receive proper representation, or at least equal representation. And I think that might be where the intention on its face of public defenders and stuff like that might be good, but it ultimately fails. So anyways, I hope that answers your question, Josh. I love that picture. I love that profile picture. John Cooper's. Hey Jay Hindem X again. I'd love to see you talk on John Cooper from Skillet. He's been talking about CRT and justice issues a lot. He's been like blowing up. I haven't heard him on this issue, but I know that he's addressing the deconversion of the evangelical stuff, and he's on fire. He's addressing in front of his audiences at the stadiums and stuff, which is great. But I'll look him up. That's two people I gotta look up. Thanks for sharing some of your experiences. I agree that we need to reclaim and define social justice. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, let's see here. There was a question about that involved Russia and the Ukraine, I guess. So Carol Swain, I need to look up too. Let me see if I can find that. Let's see here. There was a link to this article. This is Greg's. I think it was one of his mentor letters. that is just like it's really good on critical race theory. He's pretty clear on our position, and I agree with Greg for the most part on all this stuff. Um, let's see here. Oh, here we go. This might be what we're talking about. Um, so Michael, you asked. Yes. Okay. Cool. You asked this question. Leaving aside CRT for a moment, how should we apply biblical justice to our neighbor, the Ukraine, who's under attack from another of our neighbors, Russia? Oh my gosh, this is a really hard issue. Um, that situation is so complicated that I'm struggling to answer because I want to make sure that it's thoughtful. There is so much history wrapped in to what's going on over there. Dennis Prager on a recent show he interviewed. Oh man, I'm not going to remember his name. That's such a bummer. Dennis Prager interviewed a gentleman that talked about this, and I thought he gave an even-handed, level approach. Now, this isn't coming from a distinctly Christian worldview, but there's just so much going on with the Ukraine Russia stuff. And then my mind goes to, I mean, I feel like the US has done, we've, our intervention could be seen in my eyes maybe as hypocritical. I'm just being honest. I mean, we've done, I mean, our relationship to geopolitics isn't squeaky clean. And to answer that question, I think that we need to turn our eyes onto ourselves for a little bit and focus. Now, um, I'm glad that it seems to me at least that we've been slow to move, um, which is good. It's maybe causing things around here to get a little bit more tight in the pocketbook and stuff with gas prices and everything. But I think we should be slow. I think all of us need to be slow to speak, and we should be thinking about this, doing our due diligence, and actually trying to understand the issues. So I don't, unfortunately, Michael, I wish I had like a lot more to say about it, but my mind's just not, I'm not convinced uh, where I'm at on all of this stuff that's going on. It makes me sad. I feel like it was really dramatic, and I don't know how much of it is. I mean, yeah. So there's a distrust certainly for the news in my mind. So I don't know how much of it should be a legitimate concern, and how much of it is like just a really dramatic situation that's kind of being lifted up. I know people are suffering in the Ukraine. People are suffering all over the world right now. That's one of the realities of living in a post-fall world. So we should evaluate the situation according to what's really happening as best that we can ascertain it, and then we should pass it through that biblical lens, kind of that we talked about, the law of God, and how do we think what's right, not according necessarily to our politically held beliefs, but according to our theological beliefs, and move towards that. That's my basic answer. I wish I could do better for you. I'm not huge on geopolitics, guys. Just to be honest, I have four daughters, 11, 10, almost 9, and 5. So like, and my wife, and I'm just happy that I get some reading done for the stuff for work. Never mind uh all all the stuff that needs to go on to explain and understand the geopolitics stuff. But I do know, dang it, I'm gonna have to look at my phone, because I was actually, um man, I really enjoyed his perspective. I'm gonna see if I can if I can pull it up here. Um but I may not have saved it, and I'm gonna wish I had, but oh man, yeah, I didn't. Oh man. Um, if you look at Prager, Prager's website, Prager.com, and Dennis Prager, and in the last 4 weeks, 3 weeks, he interviewed somebody on this very issue. And the guy, I really enjoyed his perspective because his family is from Western Europe. So he had, and he's brilliant. He was brilliant. He knew so much of the history behind it, and he talked about the possibility of Putin's motives, and it's complicated. It's a complicated issue, and sometimes I think we look for simple solutions, and I just don't. I can't say much about it. So there, I said probably more than I want to. Let's see. Okay, let's scroll back down here. Um, let's see what Rick here, you commented here. So social justice decides cases not on the basis of their merit, but on the basis of demographics. It replaced Lady Justice's blindfold with tinted glasses. Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with that. I'm not sure Lady Justice's eyes are blindfolded. Even uh, if we look at our if we look at our justice system, I'm not sure that I'm wondering if I'm just the blindfold. I understand what's being there. That would be that would be impartial, right? So in that's what I meant by impartial, but I'm not sure that it should be totally blindfolded. But yeah, I mean, social justice, it's all about outcome, right? What I said is that everybody, they want everybody, the typical or popular social justice stuff, everybody gets the same. That's what equity is, right? Everybody gets the same, and that's just impossible. Not without violating true biblical justice. So a good comment. Let's see. Oh, Michael, I'm glad that you comment. I see the difficulty in speaking in biblical and theological discussions. It's clear to me that this one area where we need to understand what God thinks of rising up countries attack others. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the way that we do things, we people do things, it just doesn't conform with God's law. But somebody like Putin, he's not worried about that, right? But we as Christians, how are we responding? Um, I know that and I didn't mention this, and I should. My main response to this is prayer. My heart breaks for people on both sides. These countries, and this is what I meant by kind of the hypocrite comment is, I mean, sometimes I feel like we oftentimes have done and do the same thing where um we do a lot of harm to innocent people, and even look at the people who are fighting, oftentimes 18, 19, 20-year-old kids. So I pray for them. I've some really good friends who are in the Marines, uh, various branches of the armed forces in general. But one of my best friends is a Marine, and he's about to get out. I'm glad he's about to get out, but I pray for him a lot for his safety, but also that he's able to navigate what it means to be a soldier, and a Christian. Like that must be so hard. So, anyways, I like the comment, Michael. I'm not trying to dodge you, just so you know. It's just a hard topic, and I don't feel like I know enough about it. I can give you my opinions, but I don't know if they're informed enough. Um, most of the time I just share my opinions with my wife. Here we go. Jay Hindem X, you are a Marine. Well, thanks for your service, man. No joke. That's a hard life. Um, you know, One thing I want to add is oftentimes when biblical justice isn't being, let me think, when biblical justice isn't being lived out, God uses these other things as judgment. That is a reality that Scripture is clear about. So there's nothing outside the purview of God. He's sovereign, and His will is accomplished. And so sometimes when God enacts and God uses other nations, we see that all throughout the Old Testament. We see it in the New Testament to some degree. 70 AD, the destruction of Jerusalem, for example. God uses these world powers to enact His righteous judgment. So that's a reality that we have to keep in mind too. So anyways, that's just a thought that came to my mind. Let's see here. Let's see. Oh, look at this. Jay Hindem, God did use Babylon. That's so funny. This is like that. This is the point I just made. That's really great. And you put that comment. Oh my gosh! Like as I was saying it, that's so good. Anyways, I think that's going to be my time for today. If I missed your question, make sure that you hashtag STR ask, and Amy and Greg on their podcast STR ask will maybe answer it. But you can also always call Greg on the radio show on Tuesdays. He's on for like 3 hours, and I think we pre-schedule the calls now, so you can call STR and get on the air and ask him your hard questions. And what else? We've got the reality conferences. Make sure that if you can get to them, we've got Philadelphia in 2 weeks, and then next month we've got it's Augusta, Georgia. And that's another new site for us. We've been in the South. That's our Southeastern. We were just in Dallas. Before that, we were in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And before that, we were in Seattle, Washington. And before that, going all the way back to September, we were in Southern California. We were in Costa Mesa. But these conferences are unreal. They're so much fun. The students are starving for the stuff that's being offered to them, and it's a real blessing. I'm just like in awe that God would allow me to participate in such wonderful things, and just to see these students. But it's not just for students. I mean, it'd be great if you could bring some students, but it's for adults too. I mean, a lot of the people who come are adults. They're pastors, leaders, parents, just people who want to hear what we're saying and get some good training. One of the highlights has been for me interviewing Beckett Cook on his journey. He speaks on homosexuality. He was a player in Hollywood until he wrote a book about his conversion, and then he got canceled. And but his story is not only convicting, it's inspiring. So anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed what I had for you. If you have questions, of course, reach out to STR, hashtag STR Ask, call the radio show. Make sure you go get training at training.str.org. Free classes, online courses. Next month, what is it? It's April next month. Wow. And actually, I think like a month from this weekend, I will be doing a Meet the Teacher. If you participate and complete in at least 3 of the courses, you will get a special invite to Meet the Teacher, and we'll do a Zoom together, and we'll hop on and wrestle through some of these issues. And nothing's really off the table. You can ask whatever you want, and I'll do my best to answer and just spend some time with you. But you got to complete 3 courses, and it comes with you got to take the quizzes and everything. It's a lot of fun. Make sure you participate and train www.training.str.org, and it's a great resource for you for free. So anyways, with that, guys, I'm going to go about my day. I hope you do too. I hope you have a wonderful week. I'll be back in 2 weeks with the next To The Point. I'm Jon Noyes for Stand to Reason. Thank you guys so much for your time.